You think the devil has horns? No. In my 64 years, I learned the devil is the one pouring your morning tea and calling you dad. I spent a lifetime building underground flood systems, yet failed to stop the disaster at my own door. When my daughter-in-law called at 3 in the morning, her voice was the cold command of an assassin. This is how a washed-up old man buried an entire intelligence network under cold concrete. My name is Arthur Vance. At 64 years old, sleep is less of a biological necessity and more of a negotiation I usually lose. Most men my age lose that negotiation to a weak bladder or a guilty conscience. I lose mine to the silence. The world is too loud when the sun is up, filled with the meaningless white noise of traffic and television, and people talking about things that do not matter. But at 3 in the morning, the world strips itself naked. The silence amplifies the truth. In the silence, you can hear the structural groans of a house settling on its foundation. You can hear the hum of the refrigerator compressor dying a slow death. You can hear the things that are broken. I was in my garage, the concrete floor cold enough to seep through the soles of my slippers, but I did not mind. The garage was my cathedral. It smelled of lithium grease, sawdust, and old iron. On the workbench in front of me sat a disemboweled hydraulic pump from a 1950s tractor. It was a beautiful, honest piece of machinery. No microchips, no software, just pistons and valves and the unforgiving laws of physics. I was rebuilding the seals, my hands moving, with a memory that was older than my son. I carefully aligned the gasket, feeling the rubber seat into the groove. My fingers are thick, scarred from 4 decades of wrestling with rusted bolts and jagged rebar, but they are steady. They have to be. For 40 years, I served as the chief engineer for Veridian Infrastructure. It is a fancy title for a man who spent half his life walking through SHT. I designed the drainage systems that keep this city from drowning in its own filth. I mapped the underground utility tunnels, the emergency runoff galleries, the forgotten Prohibition-era smuggling routes that we repurposed for fiber optics. People look at a city and see the skyscrapers. I look at a city and see the guts. I know the pulse of the underground. I can stand on a manhole cover and tell you if the flow is blocked by a tree root or a collapsed brick arch just by the vibration against my boots. I learned to listen to the water. Water tells you everything if you have the patience to listen. It tells you where the cracks are. It tells you where the pressure is building. It tells you when the dam is about to break. Tonight, the pump on my workbench was fighting me. I applied a thin layer of sealant, listening to the wind pick up outside. It whistled through the gap in the garage door, weather stripping. A lesser man would have just bought a new pump, but I do not believe in throwing things away, just because they require a little effort to function. That philosophy applied to machines. I wished it applied to people. My thoughts drifted upstairs to the second floor to the master bedroom where my son Leo was sleeping. Leo, my boy. He is 30 years old, but when I look at him, I still see the 6-year-old who cried because he stepped on a snail. Leo is a literature professor at the local university. He teaches the Romantics. He quotes Keats and Shelley. He believes in the inherent goodness of the human soul. He is soft. I do not say that with malice. I say it with fear. I raised him to be a good man, but I forgot to raise him to be a survivor. He has his mother's eyes and her gentle heart. When my wife died 10 years ago, the silence in this house was deafening. I filled it with work. Leo filled it with books. We drifted in the same orbit, 2 different planets held together by gravity, but separated by a vacuum. Then came Clara. I tightened the first bolt on the pump casing, giving it a quarter turn past resistance. Clara entered our lives 3 years ago like a structural reinforcement beam installed just before a collapse. She is beautiful in a sharp, symmetrical way. Dark hair, intelligent eyes, a smile that is measured and precise. She works as a consultant for a multinational firm. That is what she told us. Corporate efficiency strategies, she said. It sounded boring enough to be true. She travels often, Zurich, London, Singapore. She brings back expensive scotch for me and rare first editions for Leo. She makes Leo happy. I have never seen my son smile the way he smiles when she walks into the room. She organizes his life, pays the bills, ensures the fridge is stocked. She treats me with a deferential respect, calling me Dad, and ensuring my coffee is brewed exactly how I like it, black, bitter, and scalding hot. She is the perfect daughter-in-law. Too perfect. That was the engineer in me talking, the part of me that looks at a perfectly smooth layer of concrete and wonders what cracks have been plastered over. In my line of work, you learn that surface perfection is usually a lie. The real story is always in the substrate. I wiped the grease from my hands with a red shop rag and leaned back against the workbench. The suspicion had started small little tremors in the ground that only someone like me would notice. It started with the Wi-Fi. 2 months ago, I decided to surprise them by installing a smart home system. I wanted to link the thermostat to the garage so I could control the heating without going inside. I consider myself competent with technology. You cannot run a modern city grid without understanding networks. But when I tried to bridge the router to my tablet, I hit a wall. It was not a standard consumer firewall. It was a fortress. The encryption was layered, redirecting through proxy servers I could not identify. When I checked the router logs, I saw data packets moving at odd hours, huge, compressed bursts of information being uploaded to servers in locations that did not match her company's headquarters. When I asked her about it, she laughed a light, airy sound. "Oh, Dad, the firm handles sensitive corporate mergers. They require us to have military-grade security on our home networks. It is standard procedure." I nodded. I let it go. But I did not believe it. I know what corporate security looks like. This looked like Langley. Or worse. Then there were the cars. We live at the end of a cul-de-sac in a quiet suburb. Traffic is non-existent after 9 at night. But for the past week I had heard them. Heavy tires rolling on asphalt, not the rhythmic whoosh of a commuter sedan. This was the deep, low-frequency hum of run-flat tires on heavy SUVs. The suspension squeak of vehicles carrying armor plating. They never stopped. They rolled past the house, slowed down, and then accelerated away. I told myself I was a paranoid old man. I told myself that retirement had made my mind look for patterns that did not exist. I told myself that Leo was happy, and that was all that mattered. I was wrong. I placed the wrench down on the metal table. Clink. The sound was sharp in the stillness. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was a cheap plastic thing shaped like a tire rim. The hands stood at 3 minutes past 3 in the morning. The phone rang. It was not my cell phone. It was the landline. The dust-covered rotary phone mounted on the wall by the door connecting the garage to the kitchen. We almost never used it. We only kept it because the bundle package with the cable company was cheaper if we included a home phone line. Only 3 people had that number: Leo, myself, and Clara. And Clara was supposed to be in Chicago for a conference. The ring was jarring. A mechanical physical bell that rattled against the drywall. Ring-gig-gig, ring-gig-gig. I stared at it. A cold sensation like icy water trickling down a spinal column moved through me. My heart rate did not spike. It slowed down. This was another habit from the old days. When the alarms went off in the control center, when the floodwaters were rising, panic was a death sentence. You had to get cold. You had to get slow. I walked over to the phone. I wiped the last streak of grease from my thumb onto my trousers. I picked up the receiver. "Hello," I said. My voice was gravel, unused for hours. I expected silence. Or a wrong number. Or maybe Leo calling from upstairs because he was sick. "Arthur." It was Clara. But it was not Clara. The voice was unrecognizable. Gone was the warmth. Gone was the deferential tone she used when asking if I wanted a refill on my coffee. Gone was the dad. This voice was stripped of all humanity. It was metallic precise and terrifyingly calm. It was the voice of a woman who was checking a watch while pulling a trigger. "Clara," I asked. "Are you okay? What is wrong?" Listen to me closely, she said. She was speaking fast, but every syllable was enunciated with razor-sharp clarity. Do not ask questions. Do not hesitate. You have exactly 3 minutes. 3 minutes for what? Lock the door, she commanded. Hide Leo. Get off the grid. The cleanup crew is entering the perimeter. They are not there to talk. Clara, what the hell are you talking about? This is not a debate, Arthur. You are burned. The house is compromised. Lock the door. Hide my husband. Do it now. The line went dead. No goodbye. No explanation. Just the hollow hum of the dial tone. I stood there for 1 second, the receiver still pressed to my ear, my brain trying to reconcile the woman who bought me socks for Christmas with the cold warlord who had just given me a marching order. The cleanup crew. I dropped the receiver. It dangled by its curly cord, swaying back and forth. I turned to the garage window. It was a small, rectangular pane of glass, frosted with years of grime, looking out over the long driveway. I killed the overhead fluorescent lights, plunging the garage into darkness. I stepped to the window and peered out through the side of the glass, keeping my body behind the cinder block wall. The streetlights were off. That was the first thing I noticed. The streetlights at the end of the cul-de-sac were always on. Tonight, they were dark. Then I saw them. 3 black SUVs. They were huge, blocky shadows gliding against the darker background of the night. Their headlights were extinguished. They were moving in a tactical column, silent and lethal. They were not driving like lost delivery drivers. They were driving like predators closing the distance on a wounded animal. They slowed as they approached my driveway. I saw the faint glint of moonlight on the roof rails. I saw the windows tinted so dark they looked like voids. My instincts, buried under years of retirement and domestic softness, roared to life. It was a physical sensation, a chemical dump of adrenaline that sharpened my vision and cleared the fog of sleep. This was not the police. Police come with lights and sirens to assert authority. Police want you to know they are there. This was a hit. These men were not here to arrest anyone. They were here to sanitize a site. They were here to erase us. I looked at the ceiling towards the room where my son was sleeping, dreaming his poet's dreams, believing his wife was in Chicago, attending a seminar on synergy. Clara, I whispered to the dark garage, and my voice trembled with a rage I had not felt in decades. What have you done? But the question was irrelevant. The water was already breaching the dam. The structural integrity had failed. I did not need to know why the flood was coming. I only needed to know how to keep my son from drowning. I turned away from the window. I did not run. Running is for people who panic. I moved with purpose. I grabbed the heavy wrench from the table. 3 minutes, she had said. I checked my own mental clock. I estimated I had 90 seconds before they breached the front door. I opened the door to the kitchen and stepped into the house. The silence was gone. I could hear the tires on the gravel now, crunching, heavy, final. I locked the door behind me. Not that it would help, but it would buy me a second. And in my world, a second is the difference between holding back the flood and being washed away. Game on, I muttered. I headed for the stairs. I took the stairs 2 at a time. My knees protested with sharp, grinding complaints that shot all the way up to my hips, but pain was just information, and right now, the information was irrelevant. I had 30 seconds, maybe less. The silence of the house, once my enemy, was now my only cover. I burst into Leo's room. He was sprawled across the bed, one arm hanging off the side, mouth slightly open. He looked like a child. He looked like peace. I hated that I had to break it. I grabbed his shoulder and squeezed hard. Leo, wake up! His eyes fluttered open. Confusion clouded his face. He blinked at me, the silhouette of his father standing over him like a gargoyle. Dad, what time is it? He reached for the lamp on the nightstand. His hand was inches from the switch. I slapped it away. Then I slapped him. It was not a brutal strike, but it was sharp, a stinging open palm connection to his cheek. The sound was like a whip crack in the quiet room. Leo froze, his hand hovering in the air, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal. He opened his mouth to shout, to ask why I had just hit him. I clamped my hand over his mouth. "Listen to me," I hissed, leaning close enough that he could smell the grease and stale coffee on my breath. "Do not make a sound. Do not turn on a light. There are men downstairs. If you speak, we die. Do you understand?" He stared at me. I saw the terror bleed into the confusion. He nodded against my palm. I released him. "Get up, now." He scrambled out of bed, shivering in his t-shirt and boxers. "Dad, what is happening? Is it burglars?" "Burglars want your television, Leo. These men want your life." I grabbed his wrist and dragged him into the hallway. We did not go to the main staircase. I pulled him toward the master bathroom at the end of the hall. It was a spacious room, renovated 5 years ago. Italian tile, a rainfall shower, a double vanity. To Leo, it was just a bathroom. To me, it was a hardened bunker. When I remodeled this room, I stripped the walls down to the studs. I replaced the standard drywall with cement board, backed by a layer of Kevlar mesh I had acquired from a surplus auction. I reinforced the door frame with steel channels. The door itself looked like solid oak, but it had a 1/4-inch steel plate sandwiched in the core. It was heavy. I shoved Leo inside. "Get in the tub. Keep your head down." "Dad, call 911. He whispered, his voice cracking. "No police," I said, checking the hallway one last time. "Police take 8 minutes. We have 8 seconds." I did not lock ourselves in. That is what a victim does. A victim hides and waits for the monster to break down the door. I was not a victim. I was an engineer, and this house was my machine. I moved to the linen closet just outside the bathroom. Behind a stack of towels lay my contingency plan. It was a pneumatic framing nailer modified. I had bypassed the safety mechanism that required the tip to be depressed before firing. I had cranked the air compressor, hidden in the attic, to 150 pounds per square inch. It was attached to the gun by a 50-foot hose that ran through the walls. I grabbed the gun. It felt heavy, balanced, and lethal. Then I heard it. The front door did not crash open. There was no splintering of wood. There was just a soft, metallic click, followed by the hiss of a hydraulic spreader. The deadbolt, a heavy-duty commercial lock I had installed myself, surrendered with a groan that only I could hear. They were in. I stepped back into the shadows of the upstairs landing. I could not see them yet, but I could feel the displacement of air. They moved like oil, smooth and silent. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote control, the kind used for garage doors. But this one was not paired to the garage. It was paired to the fire suppression system I had jury-rigged into the ceiling of the foyer. Standard residential fire systems use water. Water ruins carpets and drywall. I had installed a carbon dioxide flood system, fed by 2 industrial tanks in the basement. It was illegal in a residential zone. It was dangerous. And right now, it was my opening move. I pressed the button, PH-SHHHHH-KOOM. The sound was explosive. 4 nozzles in the foyer ceiling burst open, dumping 50 pounds of liquid carbon dioxide into the entryway in 3 seconds. The gas expanded instantly, dropping the temperature by 40 degrees and creating a dense, freezing white fog that filled the entire ground floor. I heard shouting below. "Contact gas." It was disciplined shouting. No panic. Just information relay. They thought it was poison gas or smoke. They would be switching their vision modes, checking their seals. I did not wait. I stepped to the railing. Through the swirling white mist below, I saw the beams of tactical lights cutting through the fog. 3 beams, moving in a triangle formation. They were sweeping the living room. I aimed the nailer at the lead shadow. "Clear left," one voice shouted. "Clear right." "Clear up," I whispered. I pulled the trigger. Thwack. The sound of a pneumatic nail gun is distinctive. It is a dry, sharp cough. The 3-inch galvanized steel nail left the barrel at a velocity that would punch through pine plywood and bone. The lead figure jerked violently. The nail had caught him in the shoulder, punching through the Kevlar vest, where the coverage was thinnest, near the neck. He spun around, dropping to one knee. "Man down, shooter upstairs." Submachine gun fire erupted. Zzz. Bullets chewed into the ceiling plaster above my head, raining white dust onto my hair. They were using suppressors. The only sound was the cycling of the bolts and the impact of rounds destroying my home. I didn't flinch. I knew the angle. They were firing blind into the darkness suppressed by the fog I had created. I fired again. Thwack, thwack. I wasn't aiming to kill. I was aiming to suppress. I needed them to pause. I needed them to think. Flashbang out. I saw the arc of a canister coming up the stairs. I turned and dove into the bathroom, slamming the heavy door, just as the grenade went off. Bang. The explosion shook the floorboards. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine. If I had been out there, I would be blind and deaf. Leo was curled in the bathtub, hands over his ears, sobbing quietly. "Up," I commanded, grabbing his arm. "We are leaving." "The door is locked," he cried, looking at the sturdy door I had just bolted. "We are trapped." "We are never trapped," I said. "Not in my house." I moved to the vanity cabinet under the sink. I ripped out the false bottom. Beneath it was not plumbing, but a dark square hole. A maintenance shaft. When I built this house, I discovered it sat directly above a defunct stormwater lateral line from the 1930s. The city map said it was collapsed. The city map was wrong. I had cleared it, reinforced it, and built a vertical drop shaft connecting my bathroom to the city's underbelly. "Go," I said, pointing to the hole. Leo stared at the black abyss. "Are you crazy? That is a sewer." "That is life," I roared the first time I raised my voice. "Get in the hole, Leo." The bathroom door shuddered. Someone was hitting it with a sledgehammer or a ram. Boom, boom. The steel core held, but the drywall around the frame began to crack. I shoved Leo toward the opening. He slid feet first, disappearing into the darkness. I heard him slide down the PVC chute and land with a wet splash 10 feet below. I threw the nail gun into the tub. I took one last look at the bathroom, the clean tiles, the expensive soap, the illusion of a normal life. Then, I lowered myself into the shaft. I pulled the vanity floorboard back into place above me, engaging the magnetic latch. Darkness swallowed me whole. The smell hit me instantly. Damp earth mold, and the faint coppery tang of old rust. I slid down the chute, my heels breaking against the plastic sides, and dropped into the knee-deep water of the tunnel. Leo was standing there, shaking, illuminated only by the faint light of his wristwatch. "Dad, it stinks." "Move," I said, pushing him forward. "Keep your hand on the right wall. Do not stop." We sloshed through the darkness. The tunnel was a 4-foot concrete pipe. I had to hunch over. My back screamed. My lungs burned. But I knew this pipe. I knew that 50 yards ahead it intersected with a larger overflow main. Above us, muffled by feet of soil and concrete, I heard the dull thud of the bathroom door finally giving way. They were in the room. They would find the empty tub. They would find the false bottom. But they would not fit down the chute. Not quickly. "Faster," I urged Leo. We reached the junction. The air here was fresher. We turned left, moving against the current. I counted the steps in my head. 100, 200. "We are clear," I said, stopping at a rusted iron ladder set into the wall. "Where are we?" Leo gasped, wiping slime from his face. 2 blocks east, under the old textile factory parking lot." I climbed the ladder. The manhole cover above was heavy, cast iron, weighing nearly 100 pounds. I placed my shoulder against it and pushed. It groaned, the rust seal breaking. I shoved it aside, creating a crescent of night sky. I climbed out, gasping for the cool night air. I reached down and hauled Leo up. He collapsed onto the asphalt, coughing. We were in the shadows of an industrial lot. The street was empty. "Look," I said, pointing back toward our neighborhood. Leo stood up, following my finger. 2 blocks away, over the rooftops of the suburban homes, a pillar of orange fire erupted into the sky. K-boom. The ground beneath our feet trembled. The shockwave arrived a second later, rattling the chain-link fence beside us. My house, my sanctuary, my fortress, my equity was gone. The fireball rolled upward, consuming the night. Leo fell to his knees. "Oh my God! Oh my God, if we were in there!" He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sewer grime. "Clara," he choked out. "She called. She tried to warn us. She knew. Dad, she tried to save us." I looked at the fire. I watched the sparks drift into the sky like fireflies. I thought about the timing. 3 minutes. She gave us 3 minutes. Not enough time to pack. Not enough time to drive away. Just enough time to panic. Just enough time to run out the front door and be cut down by the men in the black SUVs. Or just enough time to hide in the panic room and be incinerated in the blast. I looked down at my son. He was soft. He was kind. He believed in love. I reached down and gripped his shoulder. My hand was cold. "Stand up, Leo." He looked at me, his eyes pleading for comfort. "She did not call to save us," I said, my voice flat, matching the desolation of the empty lot. "She called to flush us out. She knew I would fortify. She knew I would lock down. She wanted us in that house when the team arrived. Or she wanted us running across the lawn like frightened rabbits." "No," Leo whispered. "She loves me." "She loves a mission," I said. That call was a trigger mechanism. She expected us to go out the front door or die in the living room. But I took the basement exit. I turned away from the fire. The sirens were starting now. The wail of police and fire trucks rising in the distance. The theater of public safety arriving too late as always. "Come on," I said, starting to walk into the darkness of the industrial district. "We are dead men walking. We need to stay that way." Leo stood there for a moment, looking at the burning pyre of his past life. Then, slowly, painfully, he turned and followed me. We walked away from the light, deeper into the shadows where the monsters lived. But this time, the monsters were not chasing us. We were becoming them. The pump station was known as Sector 4. It sat on the edge of the industrial district, a brick husk covered in graffiti that nobody had looked at twice in 20 years. To the city, it was a decommissioned asset, a line item crossed out in a budget meeting back in 1998. To me, it was a contingency plan. I unlocked the heavy steel door with a key I had filed myself 3 decades ago. The lock mechanism was stiff, gritty with rust, but it turned. The smell hit us instantly. It was the smell of damp, concrete ozone, and the deep, earthy funk of the subterranean river that flowed beneath our feet. It was not a pleasant smell, but to me, it was the scent of safety. I shoved Leo inside and bolted the door behind us. The darkness was absolute until I flipped a breaker on the wall. A single caged bulb flickered to life, casting long, swinging shadows against the water-stained walls. Leo was shivering. It was not cold in there. The thermal mass of the earth kept the temperature at a constant 55 degrees, but he was shaking from the inside out. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his smartphone. The screen lit up his face, a pale mask of terror and confusion. "I need to call the police," he stammered, his thumbs hovering over the glass. "I need to call the hospital. Maybe she got out. Maybe she is hurt." I moved across the room faster than a man of 64 should be able to move. I snatched the phone from his hand. "Hey!" he shouted, reaching for it. I did not argue. I popped the case off. It was a flimsy piece of plastic that would not protect anything from a 3-foot drop, let alone a tactical team. I dug my thumbnail into the seam of the phone. Modern phones are sealed, glued shut to keep consumers from tampering, but I knew where the leverage points were. I cracked the screen, shattered the glass back, and ripped the battery connector ribbon with my bare fingers. "What are you doing?" Leo screamed. "That cost me $1,000. I walked to the sump pit, a dark hole in the center of the floor, where black water swirled sluggishly, and dropped the pieces in. Splash. "That phone is a beacon," I said, my voice echoing off the concrete. Every 4 seconds, it pings the nearest cell tower to say, "Here I am." It sends a unique, international mobile subscriber identity number. You might as well fire a flare gun into the sky. "They are looking for us to help us," Leo yelled. He was hysterical now, pacing in a tight circle. "You are acting like a lunatic. Clara is CIA. She is a patriot. If people attacked our house, her agency needs to know so they can extract us. You just destroyed our only lifeline." I leaned against a rusted control panel, crossing my arms. I looked at my son. He was a man grown with a PhD in literature, yet he understood less about the world than the rats living in these tunnels. "Leo," I said quietly, "sit down." "I will not sit down. My wife might be dead." "Sit down," I barked. The command bounced off the walls. He sat on an overturned bucket, burying his face in his hands. I turned to the metal cabinet in the corner. I swept aside a pile of old rags and pulled out a laptop. It was a Panasonic Toughbook, a brick of magnesium alloy and rubber that I had liberated from the inventory list 10 years ago. It was heavy, slow, and indestructible. I plugged it into the hardline Ethernet port I had kept active by splicing into the city's municipal fiber loop that ran just outside the station wall. This was my world. The digital cloud is soft. The physical infrastructure is hard. I did not need Wi-Fi. I needed copper and glass. I booted the system. The screen glowed with a harsh blue light. I typed in a command sequence I had memorized before Leo was born. Viridian Infrastructure managed the traffic cameras for the entire tri-state area. When I retired, they revoked my admin credentials. But they never found the root-level backdoor I had compiled into the kernel of the camera operating system. It was not a hack. It was a feature I had forgotten to document. "Come here," I said. Leo did not move. "Leo, if you want to know the truth about your wife, come here." He stood up slowly, dragging his feet. He stood behind me, looking over my shoulder. "What is this?" he asked. "Traffic camera feed. Intersection of Oak and Maple. 300 yards from our driveway." I rewound the timestamp. 10 minutes ago. The footage was grainy black and white, shot from a high angle on a utility pole. The street was empty. Then the convoy appeared. 3 black SUVs. They did not speed. They glided. "There," I pointed at the screen. "That is the command vehicle." The SUVs stopped at the entrance to our cul-de-sac. The doors opened. Men in tactical gear poured out. They moved with fluid economy weapons raised. And then, the passenger door of the lead vehicle opened. A figure stepped out. Even in the low-resolution footage, her posture was unmistakable. It was the way she held her spine, rigid and perfect. "Clara," Leo breathed. "They have her. Is she a hostage?" I tapped a key to zoom in. The image pixelated, but the details held. Clara was not handcuffed. She was not being dragged. She was wearing a tactical headset. She held a digital tablet in one hand. She walked to the front of the vehicle and leaned against the hood, crossing her ankles. She looked bored. A man in full body armor approached her. He did not point his weapon at her. He saluted. Or at least he nodded with the deference of a subordinate receiving orders. Clara pointed toward our house. She made a chopping motion with her hand. A sharp, violent gesture. "No," Leo whispered. "No, that is not." She is confused. She is forced to do it. On the screen, the flash of the explosion washed out the camera for a second. When the image stabilized, the sky was lit up with the fire of our burning home. Clara did not flinch. She checked her wristwatch. She tapped her headset and said something. Then she climbed back into the passenger seat of the lead SUV. I closed the laptop. The silence in the pump station was heavy, suffocating. Leo stood frozen. His entire worldview, the narrative of his marriage, the foundation of his emotional life, had just been demolished more thoroughly than the house. He made a sound, a low animal whimper, and then he collapsed. He did not fall. He dissolved, sliding down the wall until he hit the floor. He curled into a ball, sobbing with the raw, ugly sound of a heart breaking. I watched him. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to tell him it would be okay. But I am an engineer, not a poet. I deal in load-bearing limits and stress fractures. Comforting him now would be like painting over a rusted beam. I let him cry for exactly 2 minutes. Then, I walked over, grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and hauled him to his feet. "Stop it," I said. "She tried to kill us," he choked out, snot running down his nose. "Why, I loved her. I loved her so much." "Kuch Song Chua?" I asked, slipping into the harsh tone I used for incompetent foremen. "Finished crying good. Stand up." He swayed, looking at me with red, swollen eyes. "She is not your wife anymore, Leo. She never was. That woman in the video, that is a field asset. And right now, you are not her husband. You are a loose end. Loose ends get cut." I went back to the laptop. I needed to work. Grief is a luxury for the living. We were currently in the gray area between living and dead. "She is not CIA," I said, typing furiously. "The agency is bureaucratic. They use local police for perimeter control. They knock first, usually. This was surgical. This was private sector." I pulled up a database of defense contractors I had compiled over the years. I cross-referenced the vehicle types, the tactical formation, and the uniform insignia I had glimpsed on the man I shot with the nail gun. A stylized eclipse. A black sun. "Black Horizon," I muttered. "What?" Leo asked, wiping his face with his sleeve. "Black Horizon. They are a private military company. Mercenaries. Headquartered in Dubai, operations in 20 countries. They do the dirty work that governments cannot be seen doing. Corporate espionage. Asset liquidation. Regime change on a budget." "Why us?" Leo asked. "I am a teacher. You are retired. We do not have money. We do not have secrets." I stopped typing. I stared at the blinking cursor. "We do not have secrets," I repeated. "No, you do not. But I do." I turned to look at my son. The realization hit me harder than the shockwave of the explosion. It settled in my stomach like a stone. "It is not about you, Leo. It was never about you. You were just the access key." "Access to what?" "The veins," I said. "The city's nervous system." I walked over to a dusty map pinned to the wall. It was a blueprint of the city's subterranean infrastructure from 1995. I traced a red line running under the financial district. Viridian did not just build sewers, I explained. 10 years ago, under the guise of the Urban Renewal Project, we laid a dark fiber network for the government. A closed-loop hardline internet connection that links the Federal Reserve Branch, the emergency services grid, and the regional data centers. It is air-gapped, unhackable from the outside. The only way to tap into it is physical access. I looked at Leo. "Who has the maps, Leo? Who knows where the junction boxes are buried? Who knows which maintenance tunnels are unmonitored?" "You do," Leo whispered. "Me," I nodded. "And for the last 3 years, every Sunday night over roast chicken, who have I been telling stories to?" Leo's eyes widened. I closed my eyes, the memory playing back like a cursed tape. I saw myself sitting at the dinner table, wineglass in hand, feeling important, feeling respected by my beautiful, intelligent daughter-in-law. "You know, Clara, the city has blind spots," I had said. "There is a junction under 4th Street where the sensors never work because of the magnetic interference from the subway. You could drive a tank through there and no one would know." "Really, Dad?" she had asked, pouring me more wine. "That is fascinating. Tell me more about these blind spots." And I did. God help me, I did. I drew her diagrams on napkins. I bragged about the flaws in the system I had built. I thought I was impressing her. I thought I was bonding. I was giving her the keys to the city. "I leaked it," I said, my voice hollow. "I fed them the intel. bit by bit. But I kept the most important part in my head, the Omega Protocol, the emergency shutdown sequence. She needs that. She has the map of where to go, but she does not know how to bypass the final hydraulic locks without flooding the whole sector. That is why she needed to grab us tonight. She needed to torture the code out of me. I looked at my hands. The same hands that had built this city had just signed its death warrant. "We have to go to the police," Leo said. "We have to tell them." "The police?" I laughed, a dry barking sound. "Black Horizon operates with state-level immunity. If we walk into a police station, we will be dead in an hour. The precinct captain probably plays golf with their regional director." I unplugged the laptop and shoved it under my arm. "So, what do we do?" Leo asked. He looked small, broken, but he was standing. That was a start. "We stop being victims," I said. "Clara thinks she knows the system because I told her about it. But I only told her the stories. I didn't tell her the secrets." I walked to the door. "She wants a war fine. She is fighting on my terrain now. She has satellites and drones and guns. I have gravity, water, and pressure. Let us see which one wins." "Where are we going?" "We need supplies," I said. "And we need a gun that shoots something heavier than nails. We are going to see old Marcus." I unlocked the door and stepped back out into the night. The air smelled of smoke from my burning house, but underneath it, I could smell the rain coming. A storm was brewing. Good. I work better in the rain. The police were not an option. It was a calculation I had made before we even stepped out of the pump station, as cold and hard as the arithmetic of a load-bearing wall. Back when I was chief engineer at Viridian, I sat in boardrooms where men in $3,000 suits discussed facilitation fees. I heard the names of precinct captains and city councilmen spoken in the same breath as waste disposal contracts. Black Horizon did not just buy guns. They bought access. They bought silence. If I walked into the 4th Precinct with a sob story about black SUVs and a blown-up house, the desk sergeant would have me in a holding cell and a bag over my head before the ink on the police report was dry. "We are on our own," I told Leo. He looked at the grate covering the storm drain I was prying open. "We are going back down there." "The streets have cameras," I said, straining against the rusted iron. "The streets have patrol cars. The streets have lines of sight. Down here the only eyes are the rats, and they do not take bribes." I heaved the grate aside. The smell of the Undercity drifted up, a cocktail of stagnant water, hydrogen sulfide, and the metallic tang of copper wire. "Ladies first," I grunted. We dropped into the darkness. This was not the clean concrete storm drain we had used to escape the house. This was the old city infrastructure. Brick arches laid by hand in the 1920s. Narrow, slick, with a century of slime, and confusing as a maze to anyone who had not memorized the blueprints. We needed weapons. And we needed intelligence. There was only one man in the city who could provide both without selling us out to the highest bidder. Old Marcus. Officially, Marcus ran the Gilded Age, a dusty antique shop on 4th Street that sold overpriced grandfather clocks and porcelain dolls to tourists. Unofficially, Marcus was the clearinghouse for every piece of illicit hardware that moved through the eastern seaboard. He was a relic of the Cold War, a man who had forgotten more about violence than Black Horizon's mercenaries would ever learn. And he owed me. 10 years ago, a gas main rupture threatened to collapse the foundation of his shop and the sub-basement where he stored his inventory. I had diverted the pressure, shored up the walls, and kept the city inspectors away. I saved his life's work. Marcus believed in debts, but getting to 4th Street meant traversing 3 miles of the most hostile subterranean terrain in the district. "Walk behind me," I instructed Leo. "Step exactly where I step." We moved through the gloom. The only light came from a small tactical flashlight I had salvaged from my keychain, kept low to the ground. Splash. Leo's foot hit a puddle. The sound echoed down the tunnel like a gunshot. Slap, echo, slap, echo. I spun around and grabbed him by the jacket. "Do you want to die down here?" "I cannot see," he hissed. "You do not need to see. You need to feel." I lowered my voice to a whisper. "Listen to the acoustics. The tunnel acts like a megaphone. Every splash, every scuff of your shoe travels for a mile. Walk on the balls of your feet. Roll your weight forward. Like this," I demonstrated. Silent, fluid. "And you're breathing," I added. "You are gasping like a drowning man. The air down here is thin and bad. If you gulp it, you will get dizzy. Breathe through your nose. Slow, shallow. Warm the air before it hits your lungs. It keeps the noise down and keeps you from passing out." Leo nodded, his face pale in the dim light. He tried again. He was clumsy, his movements jerky, but he was trying. He was a scholar of words, learning the grammar of survival. We walked for 20 minutes. The tunnel narrowed. The brickwork became slicker. I could hear the distant rumble of the subway trains above us, a rhythmic thumping that vibrated in my teeth. Then I heard something else. It was not the subway. It was not the water. It was a high-pitched whine. Zzzz. Like a mosquito, but mechanical and steady. I stopped dead. I held up a hand. "What?" Leo started to ask. I clamped a hand over his mouth. The sound was getting louder. It was coming from behind us. "Drone," I whispered. "Here. Black Horizon. They are scanning the tunnels." I looked around frantically. We were in a straight section of the tunnel. No alcoves. No side passages for another 100 yards. The drone would have thermal optics. In the cold, damp air of the sewer, our body heat would light up on their screens like flares in a dark room. We could not hide in the dark. You cannot hide heat from a machine. The whine grew to a buzz. It was closing fast. "Run!" I said. We scrambled forward. Stealth was abandoned. We splashed through the muck, slipping and sliding. "It is catching up," Leo yelled, looking back. I saw the faint blue glow of its navigation lights reflecting off the wet bricks. It was a quadcopter, small, agile, designed for confined spaces. It would not be armed, but it was a spotter. Once it saw us, it would tag our location. A kill team would be dropping down the nearest manhole within 2 minutes. I needed to blind it. I scanned the walls, cables, conduits. And then I saw it. Running along the ceiling was a thick, insulated pipe, wrapped in asbestos lagging. A steam main. Part of the district heating system that pumped superheated vapor to the office buildings downtown. "Get down!" I shoved Leo into the water. The drone was 50 feet away. I could see the camera lens swiveling, hunting. I reached up. The pipe was hot even through the insulation. I grabbed a rusted pressure release valve. It was seized tight. "Come on, you son of a Beck!" I gritted out. The drone hovered. It had seen us. The blue light turned red. It was locking on. I pulled a heavy wrench from my belt, the same wrench I had carried from the garage. I did not try to turn the valve. I swung the wrench with every ounce of old man strength I possessed. Clang. I hit the valve stem. It bent. Clang. The metal groaned. The drone zipped forward, closing the distance to verify the target. I swung a third time. Crack. The valve sheared off. Hiss! The sound was deafening. A jet of superheated steam exploded from the pipe at 200 pounds per square inch. It filled the narrow tunnel instantly. It was a white wall of boiling fog. The temperature spiked from 50 degrees to 120 in a second. The drone flew straight into the jet. The thermal shock was immediate. The delicate sensors calibrated for the cold, dark were blinded by the whiteout of pure heat. The moisture shorted its rotors. I heard a mechanical squeal, then a crunch as the machine smashed into the brick wall and fell into the water. "Move, go, go!" I grabbed Leo and dragged him through the steam. It burned our skin, scalding and wet, but the cloud covered our thermal signature. We were invisible in the heat bloom. We ran until our lungs burned, until the steam was just a distant hiss behind us. We took 3 turns, doubling back through a storm overflow gallery, until we reached a heavy iron door, set into the foundation of a building that should not have had a basement this deep. I pounded on the door. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. A slot slid open. Eyes, milky, with cataracts, but sharp with suspicion, peered out. "Arthur Vance," a gravelly voice rasped. "You smell like boiled shati." "Open the door, Marcus. I am calling in the marker." The bolts slid back. We tumbled inside. The contrast was jarring. We were in a room that looked like a Victorian parlor. Persian rugs covered the concrete floor. Mahogany cabinets lined the walls, filled with silver tea sets and flintlock pistols. The air smelled of lavender and gun oil. Old Marcus sat in a velvet armchair, a shotgun resting across his knees. He was 80 years old, skin like crumpled parchment, but his hands were steady. "You look terrible, Arthur," Marcus said, gesturing to a bottle of brandy on the table. "And who is the wet puppy?" "My son," I said, catching my breath. "We need hardware, Marcus, and we need to know what Black Horizon is doing in my city." Marcus poured 2 glasses of brandy. He pushed one toward me. "Black Horizon. Is that who lit up the sky tonight? I saw the smoke from the roof. They blew my house. They are hunting us with drones in the sewers. Why go to this length for a retired engineer?" Marcus took a sip of his drink. He looked at me with pity. "You really do not know. Know what? The chatter on the dark wire is going crazy, Arthur. The contract went out 6 hours ago. Priority Alpha. They are not looking for you because of who you are. They are looking for what is in your head." Marcus reached under his chair and pulled out a rolled-up sheet of paper. He spread it on the table. It was a photocopy of a schematic. I looked at it, and the blood drained from my face. "Project Omega," I whispered. "The Omega blueprints," Marcus corrected. "Black Horizon has a client, a foreign entity. They want to breach the Federal Reserve's data vaults. But the vaults are underwater, cooled by the river, protected by 3 layers of reinforced concrete and hydraulic pressure gates." "I know," I said. "I built the gates." "Exactly," Marcus said. "And there is only one way to open them without triggering the alarms. You have to flood the emergency drainage protocols. You have to reverse the flow of the entire district's stormwater system to overpressure the locks. If you do that, the vault doors pop open to prevent structural collapse. But it also floods the server rooms." "It destroys the data," I said. "It wipes the debt records. It crashes the banking system." "Chaos," Marcus nodded. "That is the product. They want to drown the economy. But the Omega Protocol isn't digital, Arthur. It is manual. It requires a sequence of valve turns in the central control hub that isn't written down anywhere. It was a security measure." I closed my eyes. I remembered the day I designed it, 20 years ago. The city was paranoid about cyber attacks, so I built a failsafe that was purely mechanical. A sequence of 19 valves that had to be turned in a specific order to reverse the flow. I never wrote it down. I never put it in a file. It was in my memory. "They need the sequence," I said. "And they know you are the only one who has it," Marcus said. "They do not want to kill you, Arthur. Not yet. They want to break you." He looked at Leo, who was shivering in the corner, staring at a display of antique bayonets. "That is why they went after the boy," Marcus said softly. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The 3 in the morning call. The warning. "She knew," I whispered. "Clara. She knew if she attacked the house I would run. I would protect Leo. She flushed us out." "She needed you isolated," Marcus said. "If you were in the house, you might fight and die. If you run, you are vulnerable. And if she captures the boy, she uses him as leverage," I finished. "She tortures him until I give her the Omega sequence." I looked at my son. He was looking at a porcelain figurine, his eyes vacant, lost in the trauma of the night. He had no idea. He thought he was running from a bad marriage. He didn't know he was the key to a financial nuclear bomb. "I need guns," I said to Marcus, standing up. I need something that punches through body armor. And I need a way to get to the central control hub before they do." Marcus smiled, revealing gold-capped teeth. "Now you are talking like the Arthur I remember. The checkbook is open, my friend. What do you need?" "Everything," I said. "Because I am going to sink them." I walked over to Leo. I put my hand on his shoulder. He flinched. "Dad." "We are not running anymore, Leo," I said. "We are going to work." "What work?" "Demolition," I said. "We are going to bring the roof down." We stopped running the moment I realized that running was exactly what they wanted us to do. Prey runs, predators chase. It is a biological imperative, a loop as old as time. The only way to break the loop is to stop being the rabbit and start being the snare. I left Leo in the back room of Marcus's antique shop. It was the hardest thing I had done all night. He looked at me with eyes that were too wide, too wet, sitting on a crate of contraband tear gas grenades, like a lost child waiting for the principal. "Stay here," I told him. "Do not move. Do not speak. If Marcus tells you to hide in the crawl space, you get in the crawl space, and you do not come out until you hear my voice." "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I am going to make a phone call." I walked out into the rain. It was falling hard now, a cold, miserable drizzle that slicked the streets of the industrial district. I pulled the collar of my jacket up. I did not head for the main avenues. I stuck to the alleys, moving toward a relic from another century. On the corner of 5th and Industrial, outside a boarded-up laundromat, stood a payphone. It was covered in graffiti. The metal cord was frayed, and the handset smelled of stale beer and desperation. But it had a dial tone. It was an analog line hardwired into the copper grid buried under 6 feet of concrete. No GPS. No triangulation in real time unless they were already tapping the specific junction box down the street. I dropped a quarter into the slot. The coin hit the internal mechanism with a satisfying clunk. I dialed the number. Not her cell. I dialed the emergency contact number she had given Leo 3 years ago, in case of travel emergencies. It was a VoIP line that routed through a server farm in Virginia. It rang once. "Vance," a voice said. It was her. "No, hello. No, who is this? Just my name." She knew. "Hello, Clara," I said. I kept my voice steady, but I let a little bit of the tremor seep in. I needed her to hear an old man. I needed her to hear fear. "You are hard to find, Arthur," she said. The sound of her voice, that crisp, professional tone she used to use when discussing quarterly projections, made my hand tighten on the receiver until the plastic creaked. "You are making this difficult. Unnecessarily difficult." "You blew up my house," I said. I removed an obstacle. "Where is Leo?" "Safe," I lied. "He ran. We got separated in the tunnels. I told him to go to the police." "The police cannot help him, Arthur. You know that. If he is alone out there, my team will pick him up in less than an hour. He is not like you. He is soft. He will break." "He is my son," I snapped, letting the anger flare. "He is stronger than you think." "He is a literature professor who cries at movies," Clara replied, her voice dropping to a conversational purr. "I know him better than you do, Arthur. I know how he sleeps. I know what he fears. I know that right now he is terrified and looking for his wife to save him. Tell me where you are and I will bring him in safely. No one else has to get hurt." I leaned my forehead against the cold metal of the phone booth. She was manipulating me. She was using the truth as a weapon. She did know him. She knew exactly how to twist the knife. "I am tired, Clara," I said, exhaling a long, shuddering breath into the mouthpiece. "I am 64 years old. I cannot keep running through sewers." "Then stop," she said. "Give me the Omega sequence, that is all I want. The sequence for the drainage override. Give me the code and I will give you Leo. I will give you new identities. You can disappear." "I do not have the code in my head," I lied. "It has been 20 years. I forget things. I forget birthdays." You think I remember a 19-step hydraulic sequence? Silence on the line. She was analyzing, weighing the probability of dementia versus deception. But, I continued, I have the blueprints, the originals, the ones with the handwritten annotations. Where, the word came out sharp hungry. The North District Water Tower, I said. The decommissioned one on the ridge. I hit a cache there years ago. Insurance. The papers are in a lockbox welded to the main intake valve. If you are lying to me, Arthur. I am not lying, I said, injecting a note of defeat into my voice. I just want my son back. I will meet you there, alone. Bring Leo if you find him. Just let us go. 1 hour, she said. If I see anyone else, if I smell a trap, I will burn the city down to find you. The line went dead. I hung up the phone. The tremor in my hand vanished. I stood up straight, wiping the rain from my face. You did not marry Leo for love, Clara, I whispered to the wet street. And you did not negotiate with me because you are merciful. You are greedy, and greed makes you blind. I did not have an hour. I had 40 minutes. I stole a car. It was a 1998 sedan with a rusted wheel well parked behind the laundromat. I did not hotwire it. I used a bump key I kept in my wallet. The engine coughed to life, sounding like a bag of hammers, but it ran. I drove north. The North District Water Tower was a relic of the industrial age. It was a massive steel tank held up by 4 lattice legs, standing 100 feet above the ground on a lonely ridge overlooking the city. It had been empty for a decade, a rusted giant waiting for demolition. I parked the car half a mile away in a wooded ravine and hiked up the slope. The rain was heavier now, turning the dirt to mud. My lungs burned, my bad knee screamed with every step, but I forced myself forward. Pain is just a signal. You can ignore the signal. When I reached the base of the tower, I went to work. I did not have C4. I did not have claymores. I did not have laser tripwires. Those are toys for soldiers. I am an engineer. I work with physics. I climbed the maintenance ladder to the first structural platform, 30 feet off the ground. The wind howled through the steel lattice, rattling the loose grating. I opened the canvas bag I had brought from Marcus's shop. Inside were not guns, but jugs. Gallons of industrial-grade ammonia and high-concentration bleach, along with a bag of granular fertilizer I had swiped from a landscaping shed on the way up. I mixed the slurry in a plastic bucket. It was crude. It was unstable. It was essentially an improvised ammonium nitrate charge. It wouldn't bring down a building, but it didn't need to. It just needed to provide a kick. I located the primary load-bearing joint on the northeast leg. This tower was designed on a tension balance system. If one leg failed, the weight of the tank, even empty, it weighed 20 tons, would shift. The center of gravity would move. The torque would shear the remaining bolts. Gravity would do the rest. I took a heavy impact wrench battery, operated high torque, and attacked the massive bolts holding the leg to the foundation. Whir thunk. Whir thunk. I did not remove them. I loosened them. I backed the nuts off until they were holding on by 3 threads. I did this to 3 of the 4 legs. On the 4th leg, the one facing the access road, I taped the plastic bucket of slurry directly to the steel joint. I inserted a simple blasting cap Marcus had given me, a magnesium strip rigged to a kitchen timer. Analog. No radio signal to jam. No electronic circuit to detect. Just a spring winding down. I set the timer for 20 minutes. I climbed down. My hands were raw, bleeding from the rusted metal. My clothes were soaked. I retreated to a ridgeline 300 yards away, burying myself in the wet underbrush, pulling a camouflage tarp over my head. I raised the binoculars. They arrived exactly 18 minutes later. This time, it was 4 SUVs. They came up the access road mud, spraying from their tires. They formed a perimeter at the base of the tower. I watched through the lenses. Men spilled out. They were efficient. They swept the area with handheld scanners. I saw the green lasers of their devices dancing over the steel legs of the tower. They were looking for heat signatures, for electronic signals, for remote detonators. They found nothing. My timer was plastic and clockwork. My explosives were cold chemical sludge. The loosened bolts looked tight from the outside. Then the command vehicle opened. Clara stepped out. She wore a long trench coat over her tactical gear. She looked like a queen surveying her kingdom. She stood in the mud, looking up at the towering rust bucket. She held a megaphone. "Arthur," her voice boomed, echoing off the wet metal. "I know you are here. Come out. Let us finish this." I lay perfectly still in the mud. The rain hammered against my back. She gestured to her team. 2 men approached the ladder. They were going up to find the lockbox I had promised. "Scan everything," I heard her say over the wind. "If there is a wire, cut it." The men began to climb. Their boots clanged on the metal rungs. Clara stood directly underneath the tank, flanked by 2 bodyguards. She was confident. She believed she had won. She believed she was dealing with a frightened old man who had left a package for her. She checked her watch. I checked mine. 10 seconds. The men on the ladder reached the first platform. One of them paused. He must have seen the bucket taped to the leg. "Command, I have a visual on a... looks like a paint bucket," he radioed. I could hear his voice drift on the wind. "Is it wired?" Clara asked. "Negative. No electronics. It looks like..." 5 seconds. "It looks like fertilizer," the man said. Clara froze. She looked up. Realization, sharp and terrifying, finally broke through her arrogance. She understood. Not a bomb to kill a person. A charge to kill the structure. "Move!" she screamed. "Fall back, everyone fall back!" She turned to run. 0. Crack. The sound was not a boom. It was a sharp, cracking snap, like a dry branch breaking, but amplified 1,000 times. The magnesium strip ignited the slurry. The explosion was small, a dull thud that flashed yellow in the rain. But the effect was catastrophic. The northeast leg, already loosened, kicked out. The steel groaned a sound like a dying whale. Screech! The 20-ton tank above them lurched. The center of gravity shifted instantly. The 3 other legs, held by threads, snapped their bolts. Ping, ping, ping. The sound of shearing metal was like gunfire. The entire tower twisted. It did not fall straight down. It corkscrewed. The men on the ladder were flung off into the darkness like ragdolls. The tank, a massive hammer of rusted steel, came down. It hit the ground with an impact that shook the ridge I was lying on. Mud and water geysered into the air. The sound was deafening, a collision of earth and iron that vibrated in my chest. One of the SUVs was flattened, instantly crushed to the thickness of a soda can. Clara was fast. Faster than I gave her credit for. She had dove to the side, rolling into a muddy ditch, just as the main support beam slammed into the ground where she had been standing a second before. Debris rained down. Twisted metal, jagged shards of rust, and chunks of wet earth. Silence returned to the ridge, broken only by the hissing of a ruptured radiator and the moans of injured men. I lowered the binoculars. I did not feel triumph. I felt cold. This was not a victory. This was just the opening argument. I watched as movement stirred in the ditch. Clara dragged herself out. She was covered in mud. Her coat was torn. She lost her composure. She stood up, screaming at the wreckage, screaming at the night, screaming at me. "Vance," she shrieked. It was a primal sound. "I will gut you. I will tear you apart." She was alive. Good. I needed her alive. If she was dead, Black Horizon would just send someone else. Someone I didn't know. A devil you know is better than a devil you don't. And now she was angry. Anger makes you stupid. Anger makes you careless. She pulled a radio from her belt. "All units, Convergence North Sector. He is here. Bring the heavy assets." I slipped backward, crawling through the brush until I was over the ridgeline. Then I stood up and walked back to the car. I had bought us time. I had thinned their herd. And I had sent a message. You want the engineer, you get the demolition. I drove back toward the city. I had to pick up Leo. And then we had a flood to start. The structural integrity of the tower had been compromised by my chemical charge, but it was still standing. Just barely. The northeast leg was buckled, twisting the steel skeleton into a groaning, agonizing lean. But the massive tank itself, the reservoir holding 200,000 gallons of stale water, hung suspended in the air, like a guillotine blade, waiting for the command to drop. The chemical slurry had done its job. It had turned a stable structure into a death trap. Now I needed to spring it. I lay prone in the mud, the stock of Marcus's .30-06 hunting rifle pressed against my shoulder. It was a beautiful weapon, wood and blued steel, heavy and unforgiving. I did not have a scope. I did not need one. At this distance, 300 yards with a target the size of a dinner plate, iron sights were sufficient. Through the rain, I watched them. Clara's team was not retreating. They were professional. They assumed the explosion was a localized trap, a single charge meant to scare them off. They were wrong. They saw the tower leaning and assumed it had settled. They were arrogant. They believed their own technology, their scanners that said the area was clear of explosives. They did not understand that the most dangerous energy in the world is not chemical. It is potential. "Go," I whispered, watching through the V-notch of the rear sight. "Climb." Clara was screaming orders from the ground, pointing up at the maintenance walkway, where I had told her the blueprints were hidden. 6 men were moving up the ladder. They were moving carefully, magnetizing their boots to the wet steel, unaware that they were crawling onto a corpse. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of wet pine needles and cordite. I shifted my aim. I was not aiming at the men. Shooting a man in body armor with a hunting rifle is a gamble. Shooting a cast-iron pressure release valve under immense hydrostatic load is a guarantee. The valve was a rusted wheel located at the base of the tank's underbelly. Behind that valve sat 1,600,000 pounds of water. It was pushing against the metal, searching for a weakness, desperate to obey the law of gravity. I exhaled. I waited until the lead climber reached the top platform, right under the belly of the beast. I squeezed the trigger. Crack. The rifle kicked hard against my bruised shoulder. The muzzle flash was a brief, angry spur of orange in the gray rain. The bullet struck the locking pin of the main release valve. It did not just ping off. The valve was under tension. The impact shattered the crystallized rust, holding it in place. The pin sheared. The wheel spun violently, then blew outward. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the tank screamed. It started as a hiss, a high-pitched shriek of escaping air and water, and then the bottom of the tank ripped open. The metal, fatigued by rust, and the structural twist of the leaning tower could not handle the sudden change in pressure. The seam unzipped. It was not a waterfall. It was an avalanche. 200,000 gallons of water exited the tank in 4 seconds. Water, when it moves in that volume, is not a liquid. It is a solid object. It is a hammer made of liquid concrete. The sound was apocalyptic. Roar. It drowned out the thunder. It drowned out the wind. It was the sound of a mountain collapsing. The 6 men on the ladder never stood a chance. The column of water hit them with the force of a freight train. I saw bodies, trained killers, men who had survived war zones, swatted from the steel like gnats. They did not fall. They were smashed downward, driven into the mud by a white curtain of hydraulic fury. The sudden release of weight caused the tower's legs to snap back. The buckled leg gave way completely. The entire steel structure, freed of its burden, but broken by the recoil, twisted and collapsed on itself. The tank, now empty, but still weighing 20 tons, crashed to the earth. The ground jumped. I felt the impact in my stomach. A wave of mud, water, and debris radiated outward from the impact zone, flattening the brush, stripping the bark from the trees, and slamming into the SUVs. One of the vehicles rolled over, tumbled by the flash flood I had just created. Then silence. The rain kept falling, indifferent to the violence washing the mud from the twisted wreckage. I chambered another round. The metallic click-clack of the bolt was the only sound in the world. I stood up. My knees popped. I walked down the ridge, keeping the rifle low. I did not run. I walked with the slow, heavy gait of a man inspecting a job site. The scene at the base of the tower was a graveyard of metal and mud. The water had carved a trench through the earth, carrying debris 50 yards into the woods. I found the first mercenary near the twisted remains of the ladder. He was half buried in the mud, his chest cavity crushed by the force of the water. His tactical gear, worth thousands of dollars, was useless against the simple weight of nature. I stepped over him. I found 2 more tangled in the wreckage of the fallen tank. They were gone. I kept walking, scanning for the coat, the trench coat. I found her near the edge of the access road, Clara. She had been hit by the peripheral wave, the wall of mud and water that had swept the perimeter. She was dragged halfway into a drainage ditch. She was trying to crawl. I stopped 10 feet away. She looked up. Her face was a mask of mud and blood. Her perfect hair was plastered to her skull. She tried to push herself up, but her left leg was bent at a sickening angle below the knee. The bone had snapped. She screamed a raw, guttural sound of pain and rage. She reached for the sidearm at her hip. I raised the rifle. I did not aim at her head. I aimed at the mud 6 inches from her hand. Bam! The bullet threw a geyser of dirt into her face. She flinched, curling into a ball, clutching her broken leg. "Do not," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a supervisor correcting an error. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, the pupils dilated with shock. For the first time in 3 years, she was looking at me. Not at Dad. Not at the retired old man. She was looking at the engineer. "You," she gasped, spitting mud. "You crazy old bastard." "I told you," I said, stepping closer. "I work with pressure. You applied pressure to me. I redirected it." "Kill me," she hissed. "Do it. Finish it." I looked down at her. It would be easy. A twitch of the finger. It would be justice. She had tried to burn my son alive. She had destroyed my home. But death is silence. And I needed her to speak. Not to me, but to them. "No," I said. "I want you to live. I want you to go back to your masters at Black Horizon. I want you to limp into that boardroom on your crutches. And I want you to tell them that the old city is not theirs. It is mine." I leaned down, keeping the barrel trained on her chest. "You tell them that Arthur Vance is not hiding in the sewers anymore. Tell them I am the one knocking on the pipes." I saw the fear in her eyes. It was cold and sharp. She realized then that she was not dealing with a victim. She was dealing with a haunting. I reached down to the body of the mercenary lying nearest to her, the one who had been carrying the communications pack. I ripped the digital tablet from his vest. I grabbed the encrypted radio handset. "My son sends his regards," I said. I turned and walked away. "Vance!" she screamed after me. "You cannot stop it. It is already in motion. You are just a ghost." I did not look back. I let the darkness of the woods swallow me. I made it back to the car, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that felt dangerous. I threw the rifle into the passenger seat and engaged the stolen tablet. It was bio-locked, but the mercenary's thumb was still attached to his hand, and I had taken the liberty of borrowing his fingerprint before I left the body. It was gruesome. It was necessary. I sat in the dim light of the dashboard, scrolling through the mission logs on the tablet. Rain drummed on the roof. I found the file marked Omega/Phase 2. I opened it. I read the operational timeline, and then I felt the blood turn to ice in my veins. "Son of a BT-sh," I whispered. The objective was not to extract the Omega sequence from me. The file contained a complete, detailed simulation of the Omega override. They already had it. They had the sequence. They had the codes. They had pieced it together from the fragments I had foolishly leaked to Clara over 3 years of dinner conversations combined with brute force hacking of the Viridian archives. The mission parameter for tonight was not interrogate Arthur Vance. It was neutralize Arthur Vance, primary prevention asset. They were not hunting me to get the key. They were hunting me because I was the only person who knew how to change the lock. I looked at the weather data on the tablet. A massive storm front, Hurricane Epsilon, was due to make landfall in 24 hours. The storm surge was predicted to be 12 feet. Black Horizon was not going to blow up the floodgates. They were going to wait for the storm. They were going to use the storm as cover. When the surge hit, they would input the Omega sequence reversing the pumps. Instead of pumping the water out of the city, the system would pump the storm surge into the Federal Reserve vaults. It would look like a natural disaster, a catastrophic failure of aging infrastructure. The perfect crime. And tomorrow night at high tide, my city would drown. I looked at the radio. I could hear the chatter of the rescue teams heading toward the water tower. I started the car. I had been fighting to save my son. Now I had to save the world. Or at least the part of it that lay below sea level. "Leo," I said to the empty car, "get ready. We are going swimming." I drove back to Marcus's shop in a daze, the wipers slapping a frantic rhythm against the rain that was turning torrential. The city was asleep, unaware that it was already sentenced to death by drowning. When I entered the back room of the antique shop, Leo was exactly where I had left him. He was sitting on the crate, knees pulled to his chest, staring at a moth fluttering around the bare bulb. He looked small. He looked broken. I did not say a word. I walked over and placed the tablet on the crate next to him. "Watch," I said. I tapped the screen. It was not the mission log this time. It was a video file I had ripped from the helmet cam of the dead mercenary, the one whose fingerprint I had stolen. The footage was shaky, wet, and brutal. It showed the briefing at the base of the tower, 5 minutes before I blew the leg. The audio was clear over the wind. Clara stood in the center of the frame. She looked powerful, commanding. "Target is Arthur Vance," she said. "Secondary target is Leo Vance. The old man is the priority. If the son becomes a liability, if he slows down the extraction, or if he is used as a shield." She paused, looking directly at the camera. "Neutralize him. Clean shot. No hesitation. We need the engineer. We do not need the baggage." The video ended. Leo stared at the black screen. He did not cry this time. The tears had run dry hours ago. He sat very still, his face pale in the yellow light. I saw something change in him. It was a subtle shift, like the moment water turns to ice. The softness around his mouth hardened. The confusion in his eyes was replaced by a dull, flat void. He looked up at me. "She called me baggage," he whispered. "She called you a target," I corrected. "There is a difference." Leo stood up. He walked over to the wall where Marcus kept a display of vintage straight razors. He looked at his reflection in the glass case. "I taught her how to make risotto," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I read her poetry when she was sick. I rubbed her feet after her business trips." He turned to me. "I want to help you, Dad." I looked at his hands. They were trembling not from fear but from rage. Rage is a dangerous fuel. It burns hot, but it burns fast. "This isn't a classroom, Leo," I said. "And this isn't a revenge fantasy. We are going up against a paramilitary organization that is planning to flood the city. If you come with me, you might die. You probably will die." "I am already dead," Leo said. "The man who loved her died in that house. I am just what is left." He picked up the tablet. "What is the plan?" I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw myself 40 years ago. I saw the same stubborn set of the jaw. He was not soft anymore. He had been forged in the fire of betrayal, and the metal was cooling fast. "We need help," I said. "We cannot do this alone. I have the blueprints, I have the will, but I do not have the access. Black Horizon has hacked the system. They control the digital locks. I need someone who can open the physical doors." "Who? Someone I hate," I muttered. We drove to the Marina District. The rain was coming down in sheets now, the precursor to the hurricane. The streets were slick with oil and runoff. We stopped at a small, unassuming seafood shack on the pier. It was closed, dark, battered by the wind. but I knew the owner. I banged on the metal shutter. "Davies, wake up." 10 seconds later, a slat opened. A pair of eyes, sharp and suspicious, peered out. "Arthur Vance," the voice growled. "You are supposed to be dead. I saw the news. Gas leak explosion. Open the door, Davies, unless you want your precious harbor to be underwater by tomorrow night." The shutter rolled up. Commander James Davies was a man made of granite and bad attitude. He was the head of Homeland Security's Regional Infrastructure Division. We had spent 20 years fighting over budgets, permits, and safety protocols. He called me a reckless cowboy. I called him a bureaucratic parasite. We hated each other with the professional respect of two men who knew exactly how the other one worked. He led us into the back office, smelling of old fryer grease and coffee. He looked at Leo, then at me. "You look like hell, Arthur. And you brought a civilian. This is my son, and he is read in." I threw the tablet onto his desk. "Watch." Davies watched the footage. He read the mission logs I scrolled through. He looked at the weather report. His face, usually a mask of stoic indifference, grew dark. "Black horizon," he spat. I knew those private sector vultures were sniffing around the grid. But this, flooding the Federal Reserve using a hurricane as cover, that is insane. It is an act of war. "It is an act of profit," I said, "and they have the Omega codes. They are going to reverse the pumps at Sector 9. The storm surge will do the rest." Davies sat back, rubbing his temples. "I have to call Washington. I have to get the National Guard." "Washington will take 6 hours to assemble a committee." I slammed my hand on the desk. "The storm hits in 5. By the time the Guard gets their boots laced, the vault will be underwater, and Black Horizon will be gone. You know how this works, Davies. Bureaucracy is slow. Water is fast. So what do you want from me?" "I need you to look the other way," I said. "And I need the master key to the manual override substation at the estuary." Davies laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You want to go into the primary discharge tunnel during a hurricane? That is suicide. The pressure alone will crush you." "I designed the pressure," I said. "I know how to write it." "And if I say no, then you can explain to the president why $3 trillion of debt records just got washed into the Atlantic Ocean." Davies stared at me. He looked at the tablet, then at the rain battering the window. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy magnetic keycard attached to a lanyard. He slid it across the desk. "You have 4 hours," he said. "My shift change is at 6. I can keep the perimeter patrols away from the estuary until then. I will log a sensor malfunction to explain the alarm silence. But after 6, if you are still down there, I have to call it in." "4 hours is plenty," I said, grabbing the key. "Arthur," Davies said, his voice low, "if you open those manual gates while the pumps are reversing, the hydraulic shock—" "I know," I said. "It creates a hammer effect." "It will blow the entire substation apart," Davies said. "You will be standing inside a bomb made of water." "I know." "Then why do it?" I looked at Leo. He was standing by the door watching the rain, his face set in stone. "Because I forgot to lock the door once," I said. "I am not making that mistake again." I turned to leave. "Arthur," Davies called out. "For the record, you were never here." "I was never anywhere," I said. Back in the car, I laid out the plan to Leo. "This is it," I said. "The end game. Black Horizon expects the system to be digital. They are going to send the command remotely to reverse the flow. They think the physical valves are just slaves to the computer." "But they are not," Leo asked. "Not if we engage the manual lockout," I explained. "The Omega system has a physical kill switch. It is a series of 19 handwheels located in the deepest part of the discharge tunnel. If we turn them manually, we mechanically disengage the motors. The computer can scream all it wants, but the valves won't move. So we just go down there and turn some wheels. It is not that simple. We have to turn them in a specific sequence. And once we engage the lockout, we trap the water. When the storm surge hits, the pressure will build up behind the gates. We are essentially turning the sewer system into a loaded cannon. And where are we pointing the cannon? Leo asked. I smiled, a cold, grim expression that felt tight on my face. We are pointing it at them. Black Horizon will have a team at the surface control station, I continued. They will be there to verify the flow. When we lock the gates, the pressure will have nowhere to go. It will back up. It will search for the weakest point, which is the access shaft they are using to monitor the operation. The one right under their command post. Leo nodded. He understood. We were going to turn the city's infrastructure into a weapon. But, Dad, he said quietly, if we are down there when the pressure spikes, how do we get out? I gripped the steering wheel. This was the part I had not told him. This was the variable I could not calculate. We move fast, I lied. We turn the last valve and we run for the emergency ladder. We have about 90 seconds before the backlash hits. It was closer to 30 seconds. But he did not need to know that. Not yet. Okay, Leo said. Let's do it. We drove toward the estuary. The wind was howling now, bending the streetlights. The city was dark, huddled against the coming storm. But under the streets, the war was just beginning. I looked at my son one last time. He was not the boy who taught poetry anymore. He was a man going to war. And I had never been more proud or more terrified. Lock the door, I whispered to myself. Hide my son. But there was nowhere left to hide. We had to stand and fight. Hurricane Epsilon was not just a storm. It was a hammer striking the anvil of the city. Even 60 feet underground in the concrete belly of the central wastewater control hub, I could feel the vibrations. The earth hummed with the impact of the surge battering the coastline. The air down here was usually stagnant, heavy with the smell of methane and rot. But tonight, it felt pressurized. It felt like the inside of a lung, waiting to exhale. We had breached the perimeter fence of the treatment plant, using Davy's keycard, slipping past the sensors that were blinded by the rain. Now, we were inside the primary access tunnel. It was a cylinder of reinforced concrete, 20 feet wide, sloping downward into the dark. A river of black, oily water rushed beside the walkway, swollen by the storm runoff, churning with the ferocity of a wild animal trapped in a cage. "Stay close to the wall," I shouted, over the roar of the water. "The acoustics here are tricky. Sound carries upstream." Leo nodded. He was soaked to the bone, his face smeared with grease, but his hands were steady. He gripped the wire cutters I had given him, like they were a weapon. "We split up at the junction," I said, pointing to a heavy steel door marked Sector 9, server comms. "You take the server room. Black Horizon is routing their command signal through the hard lines there. You need to cut the fiber bundles, all of them. Blind them, deaf them." "What if there are guards?" Leo asked. "There won't be," I said, hoping I was right. "They are concentrating their manpower on the floodgates. They think the server room is just a closet. If you see anyone, you run. You hide. You do not fight. Understand?" "I understand. What about you?" "I am going to the main gallery," I said, looking down the tunnel where the shadows seemed to thicken. "They are planting explosives on the diversion dikes. If they blow those dikes, the manual override won't matter. The water will bypass the gates entirely." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Go. Give me 5 minutes, then cut the line." Leo vanished through the steel door. I watched him go, feeling a pang of terror that had nothing to do with the armed mercenaries ahead. I was sending my son into the dark, but there was no other way. I turned and descended into the main gallery. This space was my masterpiece. I had designed it 20 years ago. It was a cavernous chamber, vast enough to hold a cathedral. 4 massive tunnels converged here, feeding into a deep, circular cistern. Above the cistern hung a network of catwalks and control platforms. Below, in the churning black depths, were the intake turbines, giant spinning blades designed to shred solid waste and debris before the water was pumped out to sea. I crept along the upper maintenance gantry, keeping to the shadows. The lighting was dim, just the amber glow of emergency sodium bulbs, but I could see them. Black horizon. There were 8 of them. They were moving along the lower catwalks, right above the waterline. They were not just standing guard. They were working. I saw them drilling into the thick concrete of the support pylons, the structural spines that held back the subterranean dikes. I raised my binoculars. They were placing C4 charges. My stomach turned. This was not just a flood. This was structural assassination. They were going to blow the supports, collapsing the dikes. The resulting surge would not just fill the vaults. It would destabilize the entire foundation of the financial district. Skyscrapers would shift. Streets would buckle. It was madness. I lowered the glasses. I had the hunting rifle strapped to my back, but there were 8 of them. If I fired, I might get 2 before they returned fire. And if a stray bullet hit a detonator, we all died. I needed a different weapon. I looked at the water. It was rising fast, fed by the storm. The level was 3 feet higher than normal. The current was rushing into the cistern at 40 miles per hour. I looked at the valves. Along the curved wall of the gallery, 10 feet above the mercenaries, were the auxiliary intake valves. Huge, circular gates, used to divert flow during maintenance. They were controlled by hydraulic actuators, but they also had manual release wheels. If I opened valve 3 and valve 4 simultaneously, while the main turbine was spinning at full speed, it would create a cross-current, a vortex, a localized whirlpool with enough suction to pull a small car off the catwalk. I moved. I crawled along the gantry, silent as a rat. I reached the control station for valve 3. It was a rusted iron wheel the size of a truck tire. I checked the position of the mercenaries. 4 of them were standing directly on the grate below the valve outlet, securing a charge to the railing. I gripped the wheel. It was cold, greasy. I braced my feet against the railing. I needed leverage. I pulled the heavy wrench from my belt and jammed it into the spokes of the wheel to act as a breaker bar. I checked my watch. Leo should be at the server room now. Now. I heaved. The wheel groaned. Scree! The sound echoed through the cavern. The mercenaries below looked up. "Contact up top," one shouted. 12 o'clock. They raised their weapons. I didn't stop. I threw my entire body weight against the wrench. The valve seal broke. Whoosh! It was not a trickle. It was an explosion of water. The auxiliary tunnel behind the valve was fully pressurized. When the gate opened, a jet of black water, 3 feet in diameter, shot out with the force of a hydraulic cannon. It hit the catwalk directly where the 4 men were standing. There was no shooting. There was no time to shoot. The water hit them, and they were gone. Washed off the steel grating instantly. They fell into the cistern. The horror happened in silence, drowned out by the roar of the water. I watched as they hit the churning surface. The current grabbed them. They tried to swim, but you do not swim in a vortex. The suction pulled them down. Below the surface, the intake turbines were spinning. I turned away. I did not want to see it. I did not want to see the water turn red. I am an engineer. I deal with physics, not butchery. But tonight, they were the same thing. Man down, screams erupted from the other side of the gallery. The remaining 4 mercenaries were panicking. They could not see me in the shadows. They only saw their teammates vanish into the black water. They started firing blindly at the upper gantry. Ping, ping. Bullets sparked off the railing near my head. I scrambled on my hands and knees toward valve 4. "Suppressing fire," a voice commanded. "Check the perimeter." They were moving toward the stairs. They were coming up. I reached valve 4. This one was directly above the staircase they were climbing. I didn't hesitate. I jammed the wrench in. I pulled. The valve screamed open. Another jet of water erupted, cascading down the staircase like a liquid avalanche. The lead mercenary was hit square in the chest. He flew backward, knocking the 2 men behind him off the stairs. They tumbled over the railing, falling 30 feet into the dark water below. The turbine accepted them without judgment. One man was left, the leader. He had stayed back near the main control panel on the lower deck. He saw what was happening. He didn't shoot. He ran. He ran toward the heavy blast doors at the far end of the gallery. "Coward," I whispered. I stood up, chest heaving. The gallery was chaotic. The roar of the open valves mixed with the deeper grinding thrum of the turbines. Mist filled the air, cold and tasting of sewage. I climbed down the ladder to the lower deck. I had to check the charges. If they were wired to a remote detonator, Leo cutting the comms line would disable them. But if they were on timers, I ran to the nearest pylon. A block of C4 the size of a brick was taped to the concrete. Wires ran from it to a central hub. I followed the wires. They led to a black Pelican case sitting near the edge of the cistern. I opened the case. My heart stopped. It was not a remote receiver. It was a digital timer. Big red numbers counting down. 000430. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And it was tamper-proof. I recognized the wiring. It was a collapsing circuit. If I cut a wire, it blew. If I tried to pull the detonator, it blew. If I moved the case, the mercury tilt switch inside would trigger it. "Damn it," I hissed. I looked around. I couldn't defuse it. I couldn't move it. Then I saw the secondary display on the timer. It was linked. This was the master detonator. The other charges on the pylons were slaves. They would all fire when this one hit 0. 4 minutes. I grabbed my radio. Leo, come in." Static. Then his voice, breathless. "Dad, I did it. The cables are cut. The room is dark." "Get out," I shouted. "Get to the surface, now." "What? Why did you stop the explosives?" "No," I said, staring at the numbers. 000415. "I cannot stop them. They are on a timer. The whole gallery is going to blow in 4 minutes. Get out, Leo." "Where are you?" I am right behind you," I lied. "I am heading to the exit now. Run, Leo, run." "I will wait for you at the shaft." "Go," I screamed. I clicked the radio off. I stood there alone in the roar of the water. I looked at the timer. I could run. I could probably make it to the blast doors in 3 minutes if I sprinted. I could survive. But if this bomb went off, the dikes would collapse. The manual override I planned to use would be buried under tons of rubble. The flood would happen anyway. My city would die. I looked at the case again. I couldn't stop the explosion. But maybe I could contain it. I looked at the water. The vortex I had created was still swirling in the cistern, a black hole of centrifugal force. If I could get this case into the water, deep into the water, the pressure and the fluid density might dampen the blast. It wouldn't stop it, but it might direct the energy downward into the turbine shaft instead of outward against the pylons. But the tilt switch. If I picked it up, it would blow instantly. I needed to slide it. I needed to move it without tilting it even 1 degree. And then I saw the hydraulic ram. It was a piece of maintenance equipment, a heavy hydraulic piston used to unseat stuck valves. It was mounted on a rail track that ran right past the bomb case ending at the edge of the cistern. If I could engage the ram, I could push the case. A smooth, steady push, off the edge, into the water. But the controls for the ram were on the other side of the blast door. I looked at the timer. 000300. I could not be in 2 places at once. Unless... I saw a length of steel cable lying on the deck. A winch cable. I grabbed it. I looped it around the control lever of the hydraulic ram. I ran the cable through the railing, creating a pulley. I backed away, unspooling the cable, walking backward toward the blast door. I reached the door. I stepped through. I held the end of the cable. If I pulled this, the ram would extend. It would push the bomb into the cistern. The water would take it down. But I had to time it perfectly. If I pushed it too early, the bomb might detonate near the surface, still destroying the pylons. It had to detonate deep. I had to wait. I had to wait until the timer was at 10 seconds. Then push. The fall would take 3 seconds. The sink rate, another 4 seconds. It would blow at the bottom of the shaft. But that meant I had to stay here. I had to hold the line. I checked the radio. Leo. I am at the ladder, Dad. Where are you? Almost there, I said, my voice shaking. Just checking one last valve. Start climbing, Leo. Do not wait. Dad. I love you, son. Lock the door. I dropped the radio. I wrapped the cable around my hand. I watched the timer on the case across the gallery. The red numbers were blurry through the mist. 000100. 1 minute. Suddenly a shadow moved near the server room door on the upper level. I looked up. Clara. She was limping, dragging her broken leg. She was soaked muddy, holding a pistol. She looked down at me from the gantry. Arthur, she screamed. Her voice was thin over the roar of the water. She saw the cable in my hand. She saw the bomb. She understood. She raised her gun. Drop it, she yelled. Let it blow. I looked at her. She wanted the flood. She wanted the mission complete even if it killed her. She was a true believer. Or maybe she just knew that if she failed, Black Horizon would do things to her worse than death. It is over, Clara, I shouted. Not yet, she fired. Bang. The bullet hit the steel door frame inches from my head. Metal fragments stung my cheek. I didn't let go of the cable. 000045. 45 seconds. She fired again. The bullet struck my shoulder. I grunted, stumbling back. Pain, hot and white, seared through my arm. My grip on the cable loosened. No, I growled. I wrapped the cable around my forearm, tightening it, until it cut into the skin. Clara was moving along the gantry, trying to get a better angle. She was trying to kill me before I could pull the lever. I looked at the timer. 30 seconds. I looked at Clara. She was directly above the bomb now. Come on, I whispered. Come closer. She leaned over the railing, aiming for my head. Goodbye, Dad, she sneered. I didn't pull the cable. Not yet. I looked her in the eye. You forgot to look down, I said. She frowned. I kicked the release lever for the emergency steam vent next to me. Hiss! A cloud of scalding steam erupted from the pipe, directly under her position on the gantry. It wasn't lethal, but it was hot and it was blinding. She screamed, flinching back, losing her aim. 10 seconds. Time to go. I yanked the cable with everything I had left. The hydraulic ram engaged. Thunk whir. The piston shot forward. It hit the Pelican case, smooth, fast. The bomb slid across the wet concrete. It went over the edge. Clara, blinded by the steam, stumbled forward and slipped. She went over the railing. I watched them both fall, the black case, and the woman in the black coat. They hit the water together. Splash. The vortex grabbed them. I slammed the blast door shut and spun the locking wheel. 1 second later, thump. The floor jumped. The heavy steel door bulged inward. The sound was muffled deep, like the earth suffering a heart attack. The water in the pipes screamed, but the walls held. The explosion had happened deep in the throat of the turbine shaft. The energy had been absorbed by millions of gallons of water. I slid down against the door, clutching my bleeding shoulder. The dikes were safe. The flood was contained. But I wasn't done. The manual override. I still had to lock the gates. I stood up, blood dripping from my fingers. Leo, I whispered. Wait for me. I began to limp toward the ladder. The water was rising around my ankles. The storm was here. I thought she was dead. I thought the vortex had taken her down into the turbines, shredded her, and washed the pieces out to sea. I was an engineer, and I trusted the physics of water. But I forgot the physics of hate. Hate is buoyant. It keeps you afloat when everything else tries to drag you down. I reached the central control room, my shoulder throbbing with a dull, rhythmic agony. The bullet Clara had fired was lodged in the muscle, but I could still move my fingers. That was all that mattered. I needed fingers to turn the final key. The control room was a glass-walled observation deck suspended above the main reservoir. It was the brain of the facility. From here, you could see the dark, churning water rising in the cistern below. The storm surge was peaking. The water level was 3 feet from the red line. I pushed open the door. "Leo," I called out. "We are leaving." Silence. I stepped inside. The room was bathed in the red glow of the emergency strobes. Then I saw them. Leo was on his knees in the center of the room. His hands were zip-tied behind his back. A gun was pressed against his temple, and holding the gun was Clara. She looked like something dredged up from the bottom of the ocean. Her trench coat was gone. Her tactical vest was shredded. Her face was a ruin of mudblood and burns from the steam. She was shivering violently, not from cold, but from shock and adrenaline. She had survived the fall. She must have grabbed a maintenance ladder before the vortex pulled her under. She was broken, battered, but she was still standing. "You are hard to kill, Arthur," she rasped. Her voice was wet, gurgling slightly. "Let him go, Clara," I said, stepping forward. "The bomb is gone. The dike's held. Your mission is failed. Black Horizon is going to disavow you. Walk away." "Walk away," she laughed, a high, jagged sound that ended in a cough. She spat blood onto the polished floor. "There is no walking away. Not for me. If I fail, I am dead. If I succeed, maybe I buy my life back." She dug the barrel of the gun into Leo's temple. Leo squeezed his eyes shut. "Open the gates, Arthur," she commanded. "Release the hydraulic locks. Let the surge in. Flood the vaults. Do it, or I paint this room with your son's brains." I looked at the control panel behind her. The master console. It was blinking with warnings. Pressure critical. Surge imminent. "You do not understand what you are asking," I said calmly. "If I open those gates now with the pressure differential this high, it won't just flood the vaults. The backlash will tear this station apart. We will all drown." "I don't care," she screamed. "I am the future Arthur. You are just a plumber. You fix pipes, I change the world. Now open the goddamn gates." "You are right," I said. "I am a plumber. And you know the first rule of plumbing." I took a step closer. Her finger tightened on the trigger. "Stop!" she shrieked. "The first rule," I continued, my voice steady, "is that shot flows downhill. And you are standing at the bottom." I looked at Leo. I caught his eye. "Trust me," my eyes said. "Clara," I said softly, "do you know why I always told Leo to lock the door?" She blinked, confused by the sudden shift in tone. "What?" "Not to keep people out," I said. "To keep the monsters in." My hand hovered over the console on the wall next to me. It wasn't the gate control. It was the emergency flush protocol. "Goodbye, Clara." I slammed my fist onto the big red button. Clang, hiss. The room shuddered. The blast doors behind me sealed shut with a magnetic thud. But the sound that followed was the one I was waiting for. It was the sound of the tempered glass wall facing the reservoir shattering. I had designed the emergency flush specifically for a containment breach. It involved blowing the explosive bolts on the observation window, allowing the reservoir to flood the control room instantly to extinguish chemical fires. Boom. The glass wall exploded inward. It wasn't a splash. It was a wall of water. Thousands of tons of black pressurized stormwater crashed into the room. The impact was like being hit by a truck. Clara screamed as the water hit her. The force knocked her backward, lifting her off her feet and slamming her against the rear concrete wall. The gun flew from her hand. Leo was swept sideways, tumbling across the floor. I didn't fight the water. I rode it. I dove forward, kicking off the console. I swam through the chaotic, churning deluge toward my son. "Leo," I shouted, swallowing a mouthful of sewage. I grabbed his collar. The water was already waist-deep and rising fast. The room was filling up like a shaken soda bottle. I dragged him toward the far corner of the room. There, set into the wall, was a yellow hatch. The personnel escape pod. It was a single-occupancy survival sphere, designed to eject into the upper ventilation shaft. one seat. I hauled Leo to the hatch. I yanked the lever. The door popped open. "Get in!" I yelled over the roar of the rising water. "No!" Leo screamed, struggling against the zip ties. "Not without you, Dad? No, there is no time." The water was at my chest now. Debris chairs, monitors, metal panels swirled around us in a deadly vortex. I shoved him inside. He was crying, thrashing, trying to grab me with his bound hands. "I love you, Leo," I said. "Lock the door." I slammed the hatch shut. I spun the locking wheel. Thunk. I hit the eject button. Whoosh. The pod shot upward into the shaft, disappearing from the room. He was safe. I turned back to the room. The water was neck-deep now. The currents were violent, swirling around the submerged consoles. Clara had surfaced. She was clinging to a conduit pipe near the ceiling, gasping for air. Her face was a mask of terror. The arrogance was gone. The future was drowning. She saw me. "Help me!" she screamed. "Arthur, help me!" I grabbed onto a heavy overhead lighting fixture. I pulled myself up, keeping my head in the rapidly shrinking pocket of air near the ceiling. I looked at her. She was 10 feet away, but she couldn't reach me. The current between us was a lethal riptide, and her leg was trapped. I could see it below the surface. Her broken leg was wedged into the wreckage of the server rack that had collapsed on top of her. She was pinned. "Please," she begged. "I don't want to die, not like this." The water rose. It touched her chin. I looked at her. I thought about the 3 a.m. call. I thought about my house burning. I thought about the gun to Leo's head. "This is my house, Clara," I said, my voice calm in the chaos. "And I just flushed the toilet." She screamed one last time as the black water rose over her mouth. Her eyes, wide and white, stared at me through the murky liquid. Then they were gone. The room filled completely. Silence. I held my breath. My lungs burned. The pressure pressed against my eardrums. I was underwater, but I wasn't dead. I knew this room. I designed it. I knew that above the lighting fixture I was holding, there was a maintenance crawl space for the electrical wiring. I pulled myself up. I found the latch. I opened it. I squeezed my body through the narrow opening, dragging my injured shoulder. I pulled myself out of the water and into the dry, dusty darkness of the conduit tunnel. I lay there, gasping, coughing up black water. Below me, the control room was a tomb. Clara was gone. Black Horizon's plan was washed away. I rolled onto my back. I stared at the concrete ceiling. I was alive. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old brass key to the pump station. "Job done," I whispered. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me. Not death, just sleep. The first real sleep I had had in 20 years. The light that woke me was not the harsh glare of an interrogation room or the divine glow of the afterlife. It was the beam of a tactical flashlight cutting through the dust of the conduit tunnel. I tried to take a breath, but my chest refused to expand. It felt as though a steel band had been welded tight around my ribcage. Pain, sharp and blinding, radiated from my side with every heartbeat. I coughed, tasting copper and bile. "He is here," a voice called out. It was gruff, familiar, and annoyed. "Get the medic, and bring a stretcher. I am not carrying his heavy ass." Commander Davies. I squinted against the light. Davies was kneeling beside me. His uniform soaked his face, smeared with grease. He looked like a man who had just wrestled a hurricane and lost, but he was alive. "You look terrible, Arthur," he grunted, checking my pulse with a rough hand. "I feel terrible," I rasped. My voice sounded like gravel grinding in a mixer. "The station, flooded," Davies said, sitting back on his heels. "The lower levels are underwater. The control room is gone. We lost 3 turbines and the entire server bank." "The city?" I asked. Davies looked at me. For the first time in 20 years of arguing over permits and protocols, I saw something close to respect in his eyes. "Dry," he said. "The dikes held. The surge diverted. The vaults are safe. You flooded my station, you destroyed millions of dollars of government property, and you broke every safety regulation in the book. But the city is dry." "You are welcome," I whispered. "Don't get cocky," he scowled. "We found the body. The woman. She washed up in the overflow filter." "Accident," I said. The word was heavy on my tongue. "Tragic accident. She was consulting. Wrong place, wrong time." Davies stared at me for a long moment. He knew. He had seen the bullet holes. He had seen the destroyed server room. He knew about the bomb. But Davies was a creature of the system, and the system needed stability, not a spy thriller. "Right," Davies nodded slowly. "Operational accident during the storm. Structural failure of the observation deck. A real tragedy." He stood up as the medics arrived. "I am burying the report, Arthur. Deep. Homeland Security does not want to admit a private military company almost drowned the Federal Reserve. It never happened. Black Horizon does not exist. You were never here. And Leo. The boy is topside. He is fine. Wet scared, but fine. He is asking for you." They loaded me onto the stretcher. The pain of moving was absolute, a white-hot fire that threatened to drag me back into unconsciousness. I had 3 broken ribs, a gunshot wound through the deltoid, and a punctured lung. I was 64 years old. I should have been dead. But as they carried me out into the rain, which was finally softening to a drizzle, I realized something. I was too stubborn to die. Recovery is a slow, humiliating process when you are young. When you are old, it is a full-time job. I spent 3 weeks in a private clinic Davies arranged off the books. I lay in a bed with tubes draining my chest, staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the perforations. Leo was there every day. He sat in the plastic chair by the window reading. But he was not reading Keats or Shelley anymore. He was reading structural engineering manuals. He was reading books on ballistics. He was reading The Art of War. We did not talk about Clara. Her name became a ghost word, something that hovered in the air, but never landed. We did not talk about the house that was gone, or the life that had burned to ash. We talked about logistics. We talked about the future. "I found a place," Leo said one afternoon, peeling an orange with a small pocket knife he had started carrying. "Wyoming, near the Bighorn Mountains, 40 acres. Well water. No close neighbors." "Is it defensible?" I asked. He looked at me. His eyes were clear, dry, and hard. "It has a single access road. High ground. I already ordered the motion sensors and the perimeter fencing." I nodded. He had learned. 6 months later. "The wind here is different. In the city, the wind smells of exhaust and wet concrete. Here in the high desert of Wyoming, the wind smells of sagebrush and dry earth. It howls across the plains, rattling the windows of the cabin, but it does not scare me. Wind is just air moving from high pressure to low pressure. It is physics. I understand physics." I sat on the porch in my rocking chair. The wood creaked rhythmically beneath me. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of bruised purple and blood orange. It was beautiful in a way that felt earned. On the table in front of me lay my Colt, 1911. It was disassembled. I ran an oily rag over the slide, feeling the smooth, cold steel. The smell of gun oil is the perfume of survival. I cleaned the firing pin. I checked the spring tension. I reassembled it with a satisfying click-clack. I am healed, mostly. My shoulder still aches when the barometric pressure drops. My ribs still twinge if I turn too fast. I walk with a cane, now a heavy piece of hickory that doubles as a club if needed. But I am breathing. I looked out across the property. Leo was down by the barn. He was welding a reinforcement bracket onto the gate. Sparks showered around him, bright orange stars dying in the dirt. He wore a welding mask and heavy gloves. He moved with confidence. He was no longer the soft academic who quoted poetry to hide from the world. He was a man who built things. He was a man who fixed things. He stopped lifting his mask. He looked toward the horizon, scanning the road. He did this every hour. It was a tick, a habit born of trauma, but I did not discourage it. He saw me watching him. He raised a hand in a wave. I waved back. He had changed. The boy who cried because he stepped on a snail was gone. In his place was a man who knew that the snail does not care about your tears. The snail only cares about the shell. We have a quiet life here. We grow our own vegetables. We have a generator that runs on propane. We have a satellite internet connection that runs through 3 VPNs. We do not get visitors. Sometimes in the dead of night, I hear Leo scream in his sleep. I hear him calling her name. I hear the grief that he swallows during the day clawing its way out of his throat. I do not go to him. I let him scream. You cannot fix grief. You can only endure it. It is like a structural load. You have to build the support strong enough to carry the weight, or you collapse. Leo is building his supports. People tell you that family is about unconditional love. They tell you that family is a soft place to land. They are wrong. In my 64 years, I have learned that family is a fortress. It is a bunker. It is the only thing standing between you and the abyss. Love is nice, but love does not stop a bullet. Love does not stop a flood. I picked up the gun and slid the magazine home. 7 rounds of hollow point ammunition, 1 in the chamber. I thought about the world outside our gate. It is a world of smiles and handshakes. A world where people sign contracts and make promises. A world where a woman can sleep in your bed for 3 years, call you dad, and then order your execution because a spreadsheet told her to. It is a world of monsters wearing human faces. I do not hate the world. Hate is inefficient. I just do not trust it. Self-preservation, I said to the empty porch. The words floated away on the wind. It is not a dirty word. It is not selfishness. When you are on an airplane, they tell you to put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. Why? Because you cannot save anyone if you are dead. I failed to protect my wife years ago because I thought safety was a given. I thought the walls of our house were enough. I was wrong. I did not fail Leo. I broke him, perhaps. I stripped away his innocence. I turned his heart into stone. But he is alive. He is breathing. He is welding a gate in the sunset instead of rotting in a grave or a black site prison. That is a victory. It is the only victory that matters. The sun dipped below the mountains. The shadows stretched out long and dark, reaching for the cabin. Leo finished his work. He turned off the welder. He walked up the path toward the house, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked tired, but he looked strong. Gate is fixed, he said, stepping onto the porch. Hinges are reinforced. A truck could hit it at 50 miles an hour and it would not budge. Good work, I said. He looked at the gun on the table. He did not flinch. He just nodded. I checked the cameras, he said. Perimeter is clear. No traffic on the access road. Good. He sat down on the railing looking at me. Do you think they will ever come back, Black Horizon? Maybe, I said. Maybe not. Companies like that, they move on. We are bad business. We cost them too much. It is cheaper to forget us than to hunt us. But if they do... I picked up the gun. I engaged the safety. I placed it in the holster attached to the underside of the table. If they do, I said, we will be ready. We know the terrain. We have the high ground, and we have locked the door. Leo smiled. It was a small smile devoid of humor, but full of understanding. Lock the door, he repeated softly. Hide the sun. No, I corrected him. Not anymore. We do not hide the sun anymore. We hand him a rifle. He nodded. He stood up and went inside to start dinner. I stayed on the porch for a moment longer. The stars were coming out. They were cold and distant, indifferent to the struggles of men. I thought about the lesson of the storm, the lesson of the water. Water is patient. It waits for a crack. It waits for a weakness. And when it finds one, it destroys everything. We are all just trying to keep the water out. So listen to me. Listen to the old engineer who has buried more mistakes than he cares to count. Build your walls thick. Check your foundations. Do not trust the surface. Trust the structure. We live in a world where the nuzzle of a wolf feels just like the nuzzle of a dog until the teeth come out. I do not teach my son to hate the wolf. I teach him to recognize the teeth. Self-preservation is the highest responsibility of a man. Because if you cannot protect yourself, you cannot protect the people you love. When the storm comes, and it always comes, do not kneel and pray for the rain to stop. Grab a shovel, dig a trench, reinforce the dam, and remember the most important rule of all. If your phone rings at 3 a.m. and the voice on the other end is someone you love, telling you to run, do not run. Do not listen. Hang up, lock the door, and load the gun. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Arthur and Leo's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of survival and justice, please consider subscribing to the Bittersweet Revenge channel, hitting that like button, and pressing the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and I will see you in the next video.